Hello and welcome to Casting Nets Podcast. I am one of your hosts, Pastor Will Harley. I'm joined here with Pastor Dave Endorf. Pastor Dave Rudot is not with us, at least not right now. He might join later if he has time or if it works out for him. But you have the two of us here, which is all you need anyway, really, right? I mean,
I would absolutely agree. I mean,
yeah,
what more could you want?
exactly. I'm not the greatest with the flashy button things, but I think we'll be able to muddle our way through. So if you ever see me glancing over off into the distance, it's probably because I'm doing some flashy button things and trying to get things queued up and ready to go. And I'm trying to make this as smooth as if Pastor Rudot was doing all of the flashy buttons. Well, thank you for joining us. If you are new to the podcast, we're glad to have you. And you started at a great time because we're kind of on our way to almost summer break here with the Thursday podcast, and so you only have to listen to us for two more times, and then you'll be able to get a break, which is going to be good for most of our ears, I'm pretty sure. As we have an opportunity today, though, before we jump into our topic, we probably should have two things that are vitally important to the show. First is that we give acknowledgement to our sponsors. Our sponsor, who has been with us through thick and thin, Good Coffee. Good Coffee has been a sponsor for our show for quite some time, and then Good Water has picked up some of that sponsoring as well. So any water from the tap is a sponsor of our show. Good Tea also was a sponsor for a little bit, but I think it has been kind of pushed around a little bit by Folgers, the fellowship coffee of the church, and we have no money that comes from that at all. And Folgers does not support in any way this show, but it is the fellowship coffee of choice for most congregations, and so we should probably put that out there. What are you drinking today?
I'm on to water this morning.
You're on to warm water or cold water?
Oh, cold water. Yeah.
Definitely cold water. I'm on to lemon water. That is where I am. I am on Michigan Straight lemon water. So it's working out very well. So if you have and want to throw up on what you're drinking, then you may certainly do that to let us know. We have Good Teas not sponsoring anymore. I'm out. I'm sorry. If we can get them back, will you stay? I mean, that's maybe if it was good green tea, then maybe we would do all right. Before we move on with the show, let's have a disclaimer, and I'm going to do some what is that? London fog tea. I've never heard of London fog tea.
I thought
Is
that
that
was like a hat or a clothing company.
was it? Do they have,
London
maybe they
fog.
sell tea now?
I,
Maybe it's black tea. I have no idea. Maybe it's chai tea. I have no idea. Let's throw up the disclaimer, and how about you give us the disclaimer for our show? We're probably going to need it.
we'd like to disclaim everything that needs to be disclaimed in a blanket fashion because we are sinners and we are forgiven sinners, but we still make mistakes, and so that's probably going to happen. But we are also just intending to begin a conversation, not to end it. And so if you have questions, please contact us at St. John's Maribel or at Brooklyn Lutheran Church in Brooklyn Park, Minnesota.
And any complaints, you may direct those complaints to Pastor Dave Rudot, who is part of our complaint department. And he does a wonderful job of talking people off the ledge. So if there is something that you're like, I don't like what they say, that's all his fault. And you can just,
Absolutely. He left us unsupervised. The beard is not here.
the beard is not here. And now we only have goatees, and that's never a good.
Exactly.
We are in training. We haven't even got the full beard going
Yeah.
on yet. And that London fog is a lavender Earl Grey with vanilla made into a latte. That is very sophisticated. That is,
I think that's too sophisticated for me. I think I'd
I
like
don't
going
know.
to the shop to buy it, and they'd be like, "No, I think you need to go shop over here."
That's what I feel like every time I walk into Walmart. This is too sophisticated for me. I'm more of a Dollar General kind of guy. All right. Well, there you go. And congratulations to the espresso machine. I've thought about those, but then I am on restriction for coffee, so it would waste money for me to buy that. But congratulations on the fancy espresso machine. Those are kind of neat. All right. Before we get ourselves into more trouble, we've had our disclaimer. We've had the fun. We've talked about our drinks of choice of what we're going to have today. Let's move our way into the show and maybe get a good conversation going. All right, welcome back to the show. Today we have an opportunity to kind of continue our conversation from last week. So last week, one of the questions that came in response to the show was a question about ambition, and it was kind of one of those interesting questions that we thought, hey, this might be a good time to have at least a little conversation on what is ambition, what is good ambition, what is godly ambition. Is there such a thing as good ambition, godly ambition, or is all ambition kind of poo-pooed by the scriptures or the like? So the question, and I'm going to see if I got it phrased right, but the question was, why doesn't ambition work out well? Is it because uh, um, what it is for, or because we take it into our own hands? That kind of phrase that right?
Yep, absolutely.
All right. So we're taking a look at ambition as and try to answering the question, is ambition not work because we're directing it towards the wrong thing, or is it because we're trying to take things in our own hands? And I think we can maybe balloon that out even further and say, um, is all ambition, whether no matter what it is or in what it's focused in, is all ambition bad? And if so, why? And if not, what's good? What would be good ambition? What we would call good and God pleasing ambition. So let's start off with probably giving an idea of what is ambition, right?
Yeah. So ambition is really just, striving for something, working for a goal, trying to achieve something. And so it doesn't have to be necessarily, you know, a pride of place, like uh, achieving a level at a job or a position at a job, which we might think of as, earthly ambition. I want to be the CEO of something, or I want to be the starting quarterback. And when we keep that in mind, you can see how you can divide ambition up into two categories: things that would be pleasing to God and things that wouldn't be pleasing to God.
Yeah, I think it comes from the word, what is it, philotem? So that idea of viewing something or seeing something as honor. And so what is, and that really kind of highlights what are we viewing as an honor, right? So what's, when we're saying that we have ambition, or when we say someone is ambitious, we are identifying, hopefully, what are they thinking is an honor, right? What are they putting on that pedestal to lift up before their eyes? And that's an important thing, because I like how you're saying that, it falls into two categories, because I think there is, in this idea of ambition, there is the idea of things can be honorable that are done in service, and there are things that are viewed as honorable but are done for selfish ambition, for selfish reasons. So I think there's that idea of do we feel that it is more honorable to strive for self, or is it more honorable to strive for the service of someone else? I was listening to a radio broadcast on, it wasn't even on the radio, it's just Daily Wire. And they were talking about how Some of the ladies in the world are finding it very hard to find spouses, and very hard to date, and very hard to do these things. And one of the people they'd put on from, I don't know if it was TikTok or whatever, they were saying how, well, I have worked so hard on myself, and I am self-reliant, and I am able to live this great life, and I have all of these wonderful things, and I've worked so hard, and I'm super ambitious to keep all of these things. Why is it that nobody wants me? And I think that's maybe where we could go with this question, right? And where we can go with this idea of ambition, because you put that picture of a person who is like, I am what we maybe say self-absorbed, and you put that up against the other one of the, well, from last week, Proverbs 31 woman, right? Or you put that up against a woman who's like, my greatest ambition in life is to serve my family. My greatest ambition in life is to see my children a success, my husband successful, and that makes me a success, right? That I'm able to be a part of that, and that's not just for ladies; it could be across the board. Um,
Yeah, and obviously the first example is Christ, who came not to be served but to serve, and that's part of the struggle of our sinful nature. That's part of how we see the sinful nature in the world, is that instead of looking at service as the ideal, as what is godly, as what is divine and holy, we see service and serving one another as being less. And so instead of being ambitious to serve and to sacrifice for the people around us, we want to dominate. And that's where, you have to be careful when it comes to ambition. What are you looking for? What's really important to you?
yeah,
Is it that Christ-like attitude or
yeah.
not?
No, I totally agree. I think there is just I think that's the pitfall of ambition, though, right? Because the pitfall of ambition is we're surrounded by people who think that the greatest form of ambition is for self glorification. That the greatest form of ambition is for self um, um, exaltation, raising myself up in a stature, getting myself better in education, finding and working towards a new object, or a new position, or a new responsibility, or a new job title. Almost to the point where I will seek out every way possible to hinder someone else in their job so that I can take over their job. Right? Isn't that kind of the ambition that's the pitfall?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And then even then when you're helping somebody else out, that sinful attitude towards ambition is still inwardly focused of I'm helping them out so I can get something out of it.
Right.
And that's not good or God pleasing.
Right. And well, and it wasn't it Paul in Philippians chapter 1 verse 17, where where Paul he highlights even people who call themselves Christian, right? And they're preaching Christ. He says, "The former proclaim Christ out of selfish ambition, not sincerely, but thinking to afflict me in my imprisonment." Where they're using Christ as the stepping stone for their own personal gain and betterment. I could probably think of a lot of mega churches that would fall into. Are we not supposed to bring that up? Is that
Yeah. Well, mega churches, politicians, I mean,
sure? Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
yeah, without a doubt. Um,
politicians who use the name of God, or the name of being Christian, or or even use a church affiliation to gain votes.
yeah. And and service too. They they absolutely have those things on their resume because they look good, but they're
Sure.
only there to get votes.
So would we put the Boy Scouts into that, or we not want to bring that up?
I don't wanna bring that up.
But I want a badge.
Yeah. And that's yeah. and that's one of those things where, I understand the pressure to get into college, but if you're
Uh,
just doing it because it looks good on a college application, then you shouldn't think that it merits anything before God. And
sure.
that's just something we have to keep in mind.
Sure. It's that the but that is a pitfall in the world and in our own sinful nature because our own sinful nature wants us to excel with the idea that I am the greatest
Yeah.
and to better myself. And I want to probably put a star next to that to better myself because I don't think bettering yourself is wrong. Um and I struggled with this mightily in a lot of ways because I in the ministry I'm doing things I'm going to I try to go to take classes. I try to continue my studies. I try to read almost everything that I can get my hands on, especially the things that I find interesting that are part of ministry. But it's one of those things where are you ambitious because you want to learn more, to better yourself, to serve God's people, or are you ambitious so that you can have another degree put behind your name? Why are you doing the things that you're doing? And I've often struggled with that because I've taken enough classes over the years of my ministry where I probably could have qualified for at least another 2 degrees if I wanted to, but I only take them for audit because 1, I'm cheap.
And I'm cheap. Yeah.
But number 2, it's like, what would it do? And some people, well, you have another degree, but what would it do? Like my people would still call me pastor, right? I
Yeah.
would still be pastor. What would it do? What would that be for? And I've often struggled with that.
Yeah. And I guess one of the things that it does is it does, signify to people that you have put in that work and that effort to attain to achieve those things so that you can contribute in ways that other people haven't. And because there are people out there who are gatekeepers of service positions who need to see that you are qualified to do that, to fill those roles. And that's part of where degrees come in and serve a useful function. And
Sure,
so I wouldn't, um, and so when we look at people who do have degrees and letters after their name, some of them do it for the right reasons because they have those gifts and abilities and they want to serve in ways that are unique, and they
sure.
do it with a servant's heart, and we are thankful for them and we appreciate that.
Oh, and I
So,
don't deny that, that happens. You have a pastor who's called into a teaching role, and he goes back to school so that he can get the degree in that teaching role, right? So that he's equipped to do the work of serving in that position. That I think that would be a an example of good ambition, right? The
yeah.
door was open. The Lord called them to use their gifts. They are further solidifying those gifts in this fundamental and formal way. But the other side of it was, like, and this is where I've often struggled with it. I'm not in a call like that.
Yeah, and see, that's where our synod has always kind of said, if you get the degree before you get the position, we look at it as pride. But
Right.
if you don't get the degree, we're kind of calling people who aren't qualified to a position,
Right.
and that has its own issues. And so,
And
um,
that's where that's my struggle because it's like you get it. Oh, you got another degree. Okay. Well,
well, and I think this is where we just have to kind of step back and say, you know what? I can't judge anybody's heart. And so if they're going to go ahead and get a degree, I'm going to assume,
sure.
according to the eighth commandment, they got it for a good and God pleasing reason. And I'm going to be thankful that God gave the those gifts to the church, and I'm going to appreciate that. And
I have no worry that I'll ever get in a position where I'm going to need a better degree because I'm not well read enough.
you're,
No one looks at me and says that guy is well read.
yeah,
But those are the pitfalls, right? So you come back and you talk about ambition, and this is I've seen ambition destroy marriages. I had a good friend of mine whose sister divorced her husband because and I quote, this is her words exactly. She divorced her husband because all he was a construction worker, and he was happy with being a construction worker. But she was a teacher. She went back to school and got her master's in education, and then wanted to go back into school and get her doctorate in something more specific. I can't remember what it was. And it drove her nuts because he wasn't ambitious to better himself for the sake of just bettering himself. He was content to be what he was. And she allowed that idea to rip their marriage apart. And I saw that it had the effects on their child, and I saw the effects on what happened in the fallout. He was remained very stable, but she kind of just spiraled, and was like almost a revolving door of people that didn't meet her standards.
Yeah.
And
And see, that's one of those cases where, sometimes it's easy to define ambition as it has to be getting degrees, whereas s- ambition can look a lot of different ways. I found a job where I'm happy and I'm really good at being a construction worker, and so I'm going to be the best construction worker I can be, and that's its own form of ambition. Or
sure,
I'm going to have these, I'm going to be a good father, I'm going to have a well-balanced life, and I want to be able to do all of these other things at the same time. And people need to uh, be able to define ambition in different ways too. And
sure.
so I, in kind of the same way, um, actually, it's funny that it was education there, because I had a couple who was she was a teacher too. Um, I don't know if she got her master's, but he worked at Menards, and fantastic couple. He he also worked on a farm, and it was his goal to have a small farm and to spend time with his family, and to spend time working at church, and to have that kind of a balanced lifestyle. And it was to and that was his view of the good life, and that was what he was ambitious for. And so, there was some time where it was, okay, let's redefine what ambition is. And that was what was really a blessing there was, okay, well, what does it mean to be ambitious? It's not just this job and getting a higher job. It's,
Sure.
you know, the church needs help. My family is important, and being a good dad is important. And these are all things to be ambitious for and positions to attain.
Well, and isn't that just another almost an instruction and encouragement in vocation, right? So, I mean, God calls us into certain things at certain times for certain positions, and some of those times are lifelong positions, some of those times are short-term positions, but those are vocations, right? And to be ambitious in that vocation with the mindset of service, I think is what we're talking about. That I'm ambitious into the purview in which I'm called. And I kind of struggle because I think this becomes the pitfall when we're never content with where we've been called. And it's like, I got to get myself better for the next position because I need the next position. And I got to get myself better. You know what I'm saying? To get to the next, to the next, whatever the next is. And we do have a comment. Let's go back and we'll kind of read the comment here. So, Rachel, thank you for the comment. It says, can you imagine the fallout if every construction worker got a PhD? We need blue collar workers. My husband worked his way up from nothing to a foreman of system engineering. His ambition was to work his way up, not higher ed. I joked that I got a degree and Sean went to work to pay off my student loans. That's not a joke though, but that you need those people.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely. Yeah.
but here's the thing that I wonder if that is And even for, in this case, Sean, who worked and he worked his way up, he didn't change outside of his vocation. And I think that's the difference. So he started and he was content where he was, and when the door opened, he walked through it. And I
Yeah,
think there's a difference there in saying that's a healthy ambition and a healthy thing to be ambitious in the way of I'm going to be prepared to walk through the door when the door opens for the Lord to move me into a different avenue in my life, as opposed to I am not content with where I am, and I'm going to work harder and get more education or do whatever so that I can, and I'll do everything I can to not be here,
yeah.
but be there.
And and s and so I would say in phrasing what I think may be the same point in a slightly different way, that it comes down to good stewardship. You know, if you're taking the gifts that you have and you're being a good steward of them in the position that you're at, you know, you're in good shape. If, however, you're taking the gifts that you have and you're neglecting your vocation to prepare for something that may happen in the future, this is where you're running into a problem. If it's going to help you where you're at, that's a good thing. If your focus ends up on something else, that's where you're running into issues because you're neglecting what you are supposed to be doing.
Well, I think Paul says it so beautifully in Philippians chapter 2, and this is verse 3. He says, "Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourself." And I think that's kind of what we're saying. You know, if in your pursuit to be better, you're foregoing your call as father or mother or worker at wherever you're working, well, then maybe that is not a healthy ambition, right?
Yeah.
Um, but if your ambition is to work alongside that and says, I'm still going to be the best worker that I can, but I've been given and blessed with so much more opportunity, and so I'm going to embrace that opportunity to learn, to grow. And then when the doors open, I'm going to take them. I'm going to take those opportunities. That's great. I think those are wonderful things. Um, but like you said, not to do it in um with
Detriment.
yeah, in detriment of where you currently are at. That's I think that is a an important qualification for for what we're talking about. So the pitfalls are our sinful nature doesn't like any of this.
Yes.
No,
Yep.
the pitfall is our sinful nature looks at this and says, "No, you got to look only at yourself," which is bringing back that the podcast I was listening to from Daily Wire. That was the case. So focused on self, you're never going to find anybody. In this case, this lady who was so focused on self couldn't find anybody who would think of herself more than her. And that there was no one out there who wanted to marry her, no one out there who wanted to be in a relationship with her. Well, it's because you're so focused on yourself. That's an unhealthy ambition, instead of focused on the family. So where are some good ambitions? Let's maybe look at that.
Well,
Um,
I think we need that final part of the question yet before we
okay,
get to the good stuff,
sure, let's do it.
where we take things into our own hands instead of uh, leaving them in God's hands as the final pitfall of ambition. So you have
Yes.
the
So
classic example of Jacob, where
I was going to say Sarah, but
yeah, Sarah, where you have Jacob tricking his father, you have
yeah.
Jacob with Laban, you have him with the sheep and the goats and the superstitious things that he does there.
Well, you also have,
And
and then you have Sarah who's saying, "Here, take my maidservant and let's do what God has promised us through that relationship." And then we all know how that's turned out in the world so far. Um,
yeah, and so this is absolutely another problem with ambition, is that
sure.
it wars against faith. That instead of seeking God's kingdom first, instead of trusting that God will get things done, in his own time and in his own way, you want to do it your way. You want to take a shortcut, and that's a problem because it leads to, idolatry. It leads to all kinds of other sins that are are not good and God pleasing.
It's interesting though because what I we could take this to taking things into our own hands. We could take this automatically to pointing out, the really really gross mistakes that people make when they're like, fine, you know what? I'll just do it myself. And there's that the ambitious streak of no one else can do it better than me. Bring that into the ministry though, and bring bring
Kind of
that
feel
into
called out right now.
yeah. Well, but we should because I think every pastor has that right where where we kind of feel the ministry rests on us, and if we don't do it, it won't get done right, and it won't get done on time. Well, whose time? Our time, in our time frame. And there's a little bit of an evil ambitious desire in that too, even though we might not see it in ourselves, but isn't that what it is?
Oh,
Like,
yeah, absolutely. That um, I don't trust my members to do it or to do it right, or they may say the wrong thing,
yeah.
or they could embarrass me when they do it, or a whole bunch of other things.
Or
And what
I
it
really
comes
want this and the members didn't. And so them not standing up to help with it kind of was them saying, we it's a project that we will tolerate if you do it, but really we didn't want it.
yeah.
And those really hurt our egos, don't they?
Oh, yes, yes, they do. Yeah, how could you have a different opinion than me about what's best for my church? Which is just a sinful way of looking at things because it's not my church.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and what it comes down to is first of all, a misunderstanding of ministry. You're there to serve the congregation. You're there to serve God. You're there to build them up. It comes down to a lack of faith in the Holy Spirit that He's gifted them and provided them with what they need for carrying out, and you're there to help build them up to do that. And
Right.
if you can't see that, you're probably looking in the wrong spot.
Right.
And then a lack of trust in God to keep watching over them and taking care of them.
I was first thing I was when I got out into the ministry, um, my circuit pastor at that time, he had said, you ever get into a congregation that doesn't have Advent services, don't start them. And I always thought, like, that was weird. I'm like, people when I first got out of the seminary, I'm like, everyone would want an Advent service, right? Everybody would want an Advent service. And you're ambitious because you want to get out there and you're like, I want to get as many opportunities before my members' eyes for them to gather around God's word. And I want to do all these things. And the very first thing my circuit pastor said, because I got called to a congregation that didn't have Advent services, and they said, if they don't have an Advent service, don't start one. And I kind of often question that. I'm like, well, why wouldn't you do that? And he says, well, one, the pastor who comes after you will hate you for ever doing that. But he said there's a reason why the congregation doesn't want it. Like they don't have it. And he said we get ambitious and we think all of these things are going to be the greatest things. And he said, but it's okay to have the congregation pick and choose what they would like. And you can guide them and you can show them alternatives, but it's okay for them to make those decisions of not having. And I've often struggled with that because, there's some churches, and Pastor Rudot, he would have been able to maybe kind of phone in here, because he's dealing with some of it now. There's congregations that don't have Sunday morning Bible study. And most pastors would be like, why wouldn't we have Sunday morning Bible study? Like, that is the thing. We should have that. That is my ambition to bring that into the church so that they would embrace Sunday morning Bible study. Do they, and this is, I don't want to sound heretical. Do they need Sunday morning Bible study? or do they need to be given God's grace and His sacraments in the worship service? It was one of a study that I kind of did way back in the day. What has preserved the church? Has it been all of the things that every pastor was ambitious into bringing into the church, or was it word and sacrament ministry given to them every week? What's held the church together?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And along those same lines, it's the pastor's ambition very often to keep bringing people in so that he can be doing something, so that he can be seen doing something, so that he can be front and center. And and at least that's me, you know.
Well, but it's true. I love
But
Bible study to show how much I've learned.
yeah, but our job is,
Right.
as Paul points out in Ephesians, to prepare them for works of service so that they can be, good parents and good at their job
Right.
as working for the Lord so that they can carry out their vocations. And if
Sure.
I keep trying to make them come in and spend all their life in these four walls, then I failed as a pastor.
Oh, but we think that that was the ambitious success. Look how many people I can gather around and have in this or in that or
Yeah.
this function or that function.
And I've guilted them into spending so much time here that
Right.
they've neglected
Right.
other things. Yeah.
Well, and I love the comment that Rachel put up there because I think that's so true. We've done that to our kids. Where if your children aren't ambitious to go to college, right, or aren't ambitious enough to extend their learning in that direction, almost to the point where we're like, okay, we're failures, and that the children's a failure and the parents are a failure. And I think that there's this idea of good ambition. Um, there's so many opportunities out there for the child to for our kids and for our people to serve in different ways that maybe you don't need that avenue and they don't have to be ambitious towards that to make that work. Trade schools are a beautiful thing. Going in to be a CPA or a CNA, sorry, a certified nurse's assistant, or working in and it seems stupid, but working in a nursing home. I did that when I was in undergrad. Worked at a nursing home, and was I trained to be a nurse? No, but did I go through the course to be a certified nurse's assistant? Yeah. And the fact that you're there, I mean, those people need that.
Oh, yeah.
And you didn't have to go to college for it, but it was something that was worthwhile to do. Um,
And I think it's worse for high school students and even high school and by worse, I mean even more absurd because we want them to be not just ambitious, but ambitious along this specific career path of going to college when the average person changes careers 6 times in their life. And like, okay, you're 17, you know. Tell me what the comptroller for Brooklyn Park does.
yeah,
You don't even have enough life experience to know what types of careers are out there, and yet I expect you to make this kind of a life choice?
right.
Give me a break.
Well, and I have to struggle this with my own child because he's 15 years old and he keeps saying, he goes, when I'm 18, I want to get my own apartment. When I turn 18 and I get out of high school, I want my own apartment and he wants to start living. And my wife is like, I don't know if that's going to be I don't know if this is, and it's like, that's maybe not a bad ambition. I think that's maybe a good ambition that and it's not in a selfish way he's trying to do that. He's doing what we are trying to do as parents, which is raise up kids that are going to be self-sustaining. I'm not going to say self-reliant because they're not self-reliant, but they self-sustain, right? They're not going to need mom and dad to feed them anymore and need mom and dad to support them anymore, but they're going to be able to self-sustain with the blessings that God has given to them. And isn't that a good thing? To have that ambition as opposed to my son's still living with me at the ripe old age of 34 and he's living in my basement or something like that. So I think there are some healthy ambitions in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, this is part of where society, you know, distorts. ambition and vocation in such a way that it messes up ambition, and it turns things
Yeah.
into destruct it turns things destructive that are meant to be blessings, are meant to be good.
Well, then I guess where would we go from here? So you have the pitfalls, we have some of the good things. So ambition can be good when it's centered on humility, centered on serving. How do we go around kind of pursuing this? And I'm not looking to say, we need to fill up 20 more minutes on on doing that. But what would you say if we were going to look at this and say, okay, so there is healthy ambition, there's good ambition in the service of others, good ambition in in recognizing I can better how I do what I'm called to do, as opposed to neglecting what I'm currently doing, neglecting where I'm currently called in the pursuit of something so much better. How do we pursue the good over the bad?
Well, I would say that there's 2 points here that are good to make, and the first comes from our comment where Rachel says her nephew asks, "Why do I have to be anything? Why can't I just work?" And so the answer to that is, that we identify first of all as I am God's dearly loved and forgiven child. I'm covered in the righteousness of Christ. And so that's how I identify, that, and I see that image of God. And so um I'm not my job, I'm not any of those things. I first and foremost, I am a Christian. I am God's. And so any ambition and anything I do is going to be guided by that I am forgiven. And then it's also going to be forgiven by the second point, or guided by the second point, which is that when we seek first God's kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. That God's righteousness comes by faith through Christ, and so he's going to take care of me. And I seek these things not out of worry or fear, but because they are good and God pleasing things to do when I have enough left over so that I can share it with my neighbor. And so I work hard to get a promotion, not because um, I'm selfish, but because I want to take care of my family, and then also be able to give to church and to the poor and pay my taxes and
Sure.
give in those ways. And let those things guide our ambition. And as we look at that, that gives us all of this amazing freedom to live our life in peace. That the world bombards us with this never-ending drive for more, that is driven by worry and fear of what could happen and what you have to have and what you need, and being better than other people and the people around you based on what you have. And God comes to us and he says, look at what you already are, and look at how much I'm gonna do for you and have done for you.
Would it following along that line of thought, would it be a good pursuit of ambition to maybe add a caveat to the or maybe add a third point to those things to think about, and that is to be ambitious to the need. Kind of the idea of God places you in vocations, God places you into these roles, and when a need arises, be ambitious to meet the need.
Yeah, absolutely. That you look at where you are in life and the people around you, and take care of those things. Yeah. And that's
Yeah,
where our society gets to be so abstract and philosophical that it ends up not doing anything. Whereas
sure.
whereas, what does God say? Look at your family. Look at the people who are right there, and your neighbors, and get to know your neighbors so that when they need somebody to, watch their house because they're going to the hospital because that's where their wife is. You can come over and you can water their plants and feed their dog, and they don't have to worry about it. And and that's exactly what I think you're talking about.
Well, and to expand that out even further, if you're a teacher let's say you're a teacher in one of our Lutheran schools, and you're like, you know what, I'm seeing an uptick in special needs type of instruction. Someone to take on some of that mantle, because otherwise we're sending them always to the public school system, or we're always sending them away to something else. Maybe you have those skills. My mom would always say, maybe that's the Holy Spirit's way of tapping you on the shoulder and saying, I've placed this need before you because you have the skills to work towards taking it on. And being ambitious to see those things, recognize those things, and to say, you know, here I am, Lord, send me. Right. Um, the words from Isaiah, which are going to be coming up this Sunday as we celebrate Trinity Sunday, just the simple fact that the Lord has redeemed us, the Lord has forgiven us, the Lord has placed us into these positions, and then frees us to engage with them. And in that engaging with them, needs will come up, the needs of other people, the needs of things, and how can we meet those needs, and to step forward in faith and say, I will try. Lord, use me to do that thing. And I would say that because we do need teachers in our schools,
Yeah.
right? We need
And the
pastors.
Oh, absolutely. And the wonderful thing about how we've been designed as people is that we tend to enjoy the things that we're good at. That's just how we're created. And so a
Sure.
lot of people will feel this kind of guilt of, well, I I like it, so I can't really do it because I'd feel guilty about doing something I enjoy. And it's kind of like, no, 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 no. It's okay. It's okay to do something you enjoy
Sure.
because that's where your gifts are. And God, you are God's dearly loved and forgiven child. He doesn't call you to suffer and make yourself miserable.
But
If
aren't you
that
supposed to be paid for the things you hate?
that's
You I
kind
have
of
to
what we think.
I have to hate my job and get paid for it, and then not get paid for the things that I really love to do, because then it would become my job and I would hate it.
Yeah. And so, if you find something at your job that you enjoy and there's a need for it, you know, go ahead, run with that.
What's that say about every pastor, though? If we only do the jobs that we hate
I
to get paid for, and the things we love we don't get paid for.
I don't know. I tell my members I preach and I teach for free, but they pay me a lot of money to go to meetings.
Oh, that is beautiful. That is I like it. I like it.
So
I'm gonna
far,
take
nobody's taken me up on the fact that if I'll just preach and teach for free and don't make me go to meetings. But
that would be great. Yeah, you just pay me to go to the meetings every month, and I do the preaching and teaching for free.
yeah, I'm actually hoping to get out of the meetings. Like like I will stay here for free if I don't have to get out and if I don't have to go to meetings.
Honestly, my congregation might actually consider that. Well, all right, I think we could make that work. Oh, all right. Well, hopefully this helped answer the question that was posed to you by your friend, and hopefully this has been a wonderful way to maybe take apart some of this ambition in the world that we see, and recognize that as Christians, it's okay to be ambitious in humility, to be ambitious in working in the callings God has given to us, and recognizing that we have everything already because we are the children of God through our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, who has washed us clean. Um, and so now we're free to live and to pursue and to kind of engage with these vocations and fill the needs that God has placed before us, as He grows His church and as He works for His people and as He allows us to work for others. So I think that's kind of where I'm comfortable kind of leaving the conversation. I don't know where, if
Amen.
you have anything else to add. Otherwise, amen is the way to go, and say we invite you to come and join us for Tuesday when we are beyond the sermon. I hope you have a very memorable Memorial Day coming up, as we remember the soldiers who have fought for our freedoms, as we kind of remember and honor those who have given their life for us so that we can do the things that we enjoy and that we are called to do in this country. And then next Thursday will be our last Thursday podcast, and then we'll take a hiatus for a summer and then come back in the fall. So hopefully you will join us for that. And other than all of that, may God richly bless you as you go about your day and live in God's grace, being ambitious to serve one another in his kingdom. All right, welcome back to the post show. Thank you for sticking around and listening to the good stuff. Now you just get the leftovers. Sometimes the leftovers are better though the second day.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, especially with lasagna.
Lasagna doesn't last very long in my house. So usually we cook it and then it's my kids are getting third, and anything Italian is pretty much gone in my house when we serve it. So we had Italian sausage and we had I mixed some Italian sausage in with the spaghetti
Ooh,
sauce. And I had I went through the line because we kind of do everything by line. It was on the stove. I went through. I put a little good helping on my plate, and the sauce and everything. And by the time my wife and I were done eating, because we don't inhale our food, we're at that age where that's bad for us. By the time we got back up there was nothing left. My three children had like three servings, just full mounds on their plate. So yeah, anything Italian does not last long. Pizza doesn't last long in the house. Um, Never really
see,
makes.
that's where it's just my wife and I, and she doesn't eat leftovers, so
Oh, well, there you go. So you purposely make more than enough so that you can take
I
something to work.
yeah.
That's a that's a good thing. How much does your dog end up eating?
Oh, we not too much, but
Enough.
enough. Yeah.
Yeah, our dogs end up, if it sits in the fridge for a week, our dogs end up having it on that Sunday. So that's their Sunday brunch. So they usually get the leftovers, but no, it's good. Yeah, I'm trying to branch out on my cooking ability, and right now, all the easy recipes are usually the Italian ones that you can get in a box, or
Yep. Yeah.
um, or I do a mac and cheese casserole. And by mac and cheese casserole, all I mean is I take cheese and I put like cut up a brick of cheese, actually like two bricks of cheese, and I layer the bottom, and then I put the noodles on top, and then I layer another cheese layer, and then I put noodles on top, and another cheese layer, and noodles on top, and then when you get to the top, it's just shredded cheese, and I throw it in the oven, and I call that a casserole. Really, it's just a heart attack.
It's just see, that's kinda like my grandfather's meatloaf, which was like a layer of meatloaf, a layer of cheese, a layer of bacon, a layer of meatloaf, a layer of cheese, a layer it was great.
Absolutely, it was great.
Yeah,
That's the way it should be.
and it ended up fried because of all of the grease that was
Yeah, that's the thing when you get older and you go to the doctor and they look at you and they're like, your cholesterol's kind of high, and what do you eat for your normal meal? And you're like, bacon, sausage, pretty much any meat product. Even the meat products that I don't even know what kind of meat they put in there. We call them hot dogs. Um, what do you eat for vegetables? I try not to.
I tried.
They're not healthy for me. They make my stomach upset.
Been known to eat guacamole. Does that count?
Does salsa work with chips?
Also chips.
What's your dairy intake? Lots of cheese.
Put sour cream on my
Yeah, and they look at you. They're like, your diet should probably change. And I'm like, "Oh, is it worth living?" That's uh, yeah. Take out the comfort of food. Is it really worth living? Really? I mean, I've often told my I told my doctor that. I said, yeah, if my diet involves me not eating meat, I should die. My wife does not agree with me, by the way, but I told her, I said, what's the point?
Oh,
So, well, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you, dear listeners, for being a part of the conversation, for thinking things through. If you would like to ask any questions, send us an email. You can get us at castingnetspod@gmail.com. You can absolutely put in a show note after the show if you want to load something up there. Catch us in our congregations, so you can certainly bring a question there. If you have any discontent, or if there's anything that you are aggravated about, something that we said, again, we direct all of your comments to Pastor Dave Rudot. He is our PR person, and he would be more than happy to solve all of those issues. And then we'll blame him and say, well, we were really let off the chains and unsupervised.
unsupervised. Yeah,
So it's all his fault anyway.
yeah, because we didn't have the beard.
We didn't have the beard. There you go. Well, thank you very much for joining us, and have yourself a wonderful